Hey, my friend, welcome to day 11. We just read Genesis 39 through 41. We saw Joseph tested in private. His integrity was really pushed, and we're going to focus around Joseph all day today. He was forgotten in confinement in chapter 40, and he was elevated in chapter 41. Really, this arc that we're seeing here, this narrative, is that God forms character before granting authority, which we don't love. We want to get promoted before we are the person that deserves it. But as I read through his story, Joseph's story, a lot of questions popped up in my head about what's going on here. Like, why does Joseph's obedience lead to prison? Why doesn't God just intervene and say, hey, this is Joey. He's my guy. He's going to be second in command. Let's just make it happen, Pharaoh. Why doesn't he do that? And big question that I'm seeing here is like, is faithfulness worth it? And I know a lot of people ask that in everyday life. But the story forces these questions. And I believe this scripture answers them. You know, Joseph's temptation with Potiphar's wife was way more than sexual. And let me be upfront. It was definitely sexual. That's what she was trying to get down with. I don't know what version of the scriptures you're reading. If it's PG, this was not a PG moment. You know, Potiphar's wife was trying to do what the scripture says she was trying to do. Ultimately, big picture here, before this, Potiphar trusted Joseph with everything. Access, authority, opportunity. And sleeping with his wife meant that Joseph would have been claiming power. This would have been an ancient power grab, because in the ancient world, this would have meant advancement. This is one way to get promoted in the ancient world, was just take over your boss's house, have sex with your superior's wife. It would have been a political takeover. We see it later in the Old Testament with King Saul, that somebody tried to do that within his story, Abner, and we see it with King David, with his son Absalom, try to do this as well. And this would have been a shortcut promotion, fast track to being the boss man for Joseph. But here's the deal. God's way always rejects stolen authority. Power through illegitimate ascent, climbing up the totem pole. And Joseph refuses because he knows who promotes, that it's God and God only. He even says it like this. You read it today. How could I do this great evil in sin against God? What? There was no law yet. There was no 10 commandments. There wasn't even witnesses around to be able to testify against Joseph that he did this terrible act. But he had a fear of God. He had a fear of God over a fear of man. He had a fear of God over a fear of loss. He had a fear of God over a fear of prison. And no promotion was a orange enough carrot dangling in front of him to sin against God in such a way. Because ultimately God promotes and sin usurps. God promotes within the kingdom because he is the king. And sin at its very core is an attempt to usurp that kingdom with God sitting on the throne. Here's the deal. In this story, Joseph didn't linger around. He fled. And I feel like this is a principle for you. Whether it's sexual immorality or not, you need to flee. Temptation had to be daily. These little things, they just don't happen out of nowhere. She had to be building this foundation, and, the flirting and all this kind of stuff, her showing her power over him and trying to trap him in a corner. My friends, there is no trap. There's no temptation known to man that God will not give you a way out of. So the temptation was daily. It wasn't once. He was able to pre-decide what he was going to do if that day ever came. And the day did come, and he ran. He left everything behind. He obeyed even when it cost him his reputation. Righteousness is actually chosen quickly. Right now, I'm deciding to be righteous, no matter what happens, no matter what is thrown my way. Ooh, it looks like this might get thrown my way, so I'm going to decide right now to be righteous. And when the moment happens, you can act righteously quickly. You can flee. Joseph, he left. He fled so quickly. He left his outer garment behind, which the outer garment signified a lot for a Jewish man. It was his reputation, but he would rather keep his integrity and lose his reputation, because obedience costs something tangible. Your reputation, maybe. His outer garment. It became visible proof of the crime he did not commit, and it cost him dearly. Obedience cost him dearly. The garment became the accusation. What he left behind, it told a false story. This truth had no witnesses. The fabric was the witness. And Joseph is condemned by what he refused to keep. But his silence did not equal guilt. Even though as unjust as it might have been, he was silent because he was righteous for the Lord. But this in Joseph's story was the second time a garment altered Joseph's life. You remember the first robe. We talked about it yesterday. Remember the brothers, they deceived Father Jacob with the robe of Joseph, the technicolor robe that Jacob gave his son whom he so loved. They tricked him and they put blood on it and they tricked him. And now this new garment deceives Potiphar, ultimately the authority figure in his life. Now clothing carries identity in this story, and you see loss and you see accusation, and you see Joseph, after losing the garment, he didn't lose his character. He stayed who he was in God, and God was with Joseph even when justice wasn't. Potiphar believed the lie. The accuser is never punished. Potiphar's wife, she could just be out here accusing whoever, and she probably was, but Joseph was the one punished and in prison. Yet somehow Scripture insists that God is present, and we see the proof of that. So here in Genesis 39, here's what it's teaching us, that faithfulness doesn't guarantee fairness. Integrity may cost your reputation, but God forms you before he elevates you. And that's the story here. He formed Joseph into who he wanted him to be, because who you are in private is who you will become in public. Thank you for hanging with me today. I hope that's encouraging to you in your private walk today, that who you are in private will form who you will become in public. Love y'all. See y'all in the discussion room.